We are joined today, Ubuntu pedagogy theoretician. We are joined today on this particular segment of the Pan-African Leadership Series by Dr. Alicia Blackwood. She is the creator, purveyor of a construct of the Ubuntu pedagogy in the context of delivering teaching. I wouldn't say even the experiential, but it is experiential and didactic elements of instructing our children. She has traveled the world, understanding the construct. And so we will get into how she conceptualized Ubuntu, how she was introduced to the construct, and I know how that happened. But also we will talk about how is it being implemented in the context of educating children. So Dr. Blackwood, just give us an introduction about who you are and how you came into this understanding of the impact of Ubuntu in education.
All right, greetings, everyone. And I am Alicia Blackwood, and I have been in education for over 20 years, been in as a part of education from the primary level all the way to the university level. And so, as we speak about Ubuntu, it was interesting how this concept came to me, I want to say over 12 years ago. And so, as a teacher, a classroom teacher at that time in an elementary school, a professor who studied and lived in South Africa was observing me one day in my classroom and said, "You actually," he left a note to said, "You teach in the spirit of Ubuntu." I had absolutely no idea what that was. Mind you, it was the first time I'm hearing the word as well. And so I've been on a journey studying the concept, trying to understand what were some of the pedagogical moves that I was making in the classroom for him to leave such a statement. And so it took me my first 2 years doing a self-study. So I am a researcher as well. So my initial study was an action research. And so I did a self-study, really trying to pay attention to everything that I was doing in my class and taking copious notes on that. And so that journey continued, that everything I came across in terms of Ubuntu, I have been reading, studying, and fast forward to 2017, I had an amazing opportunity to live and work in Botswana, Namibia, and also in South Africa. So I had the opportunity to go in the schools and to live with a teacher and study the concept within the land. Ubuntu, coming from the Bantu languages, it's it's one of those constructs that we bring forward here in the West and trying to unpack it so that my colleagues, my other fellow researchers were able to have a deeper understanding. And so my doctoral work went through the journey of doing an ethnographic study on the construct. And so one of the seminal writers, Dr. Okpokado from the University of Missouri, she had a book on Ubuntu. And so I read that book from cover to cover. And I mean, I reached out to her. She's originally from Nigeria. And we had amazing conversations to now put this construct in terms of research and in terms of helping teachers and students in instructionally and seeing the levels of humanism within the curriculum.
So you brought a whole lot of concept in, right? You brought in the idea of research that is action research. You brought an ethnographic discourse, and also the idea of research of a construct that belongs to a community. So let's back up a bit, and so that we can get some clarification. So Ubuntu, right? The idea of universal being, the idea from the Zulu that says that there is a notion of humanity that's tied to everything that we do, that everything is connected. And so I know who wrote that note, because that person was me. When I observed your classroom, and I observed how you were actually engaging with the students and how they were engaging with you and how they were engaging with one another. And so when I saw that I knew exactly that this was a spirit of Ubuntu, and that it's not something that is theoretical in the sense of that it is something that is conceptual. It is something that is lived. It's an experience. It's experiential. And that's exactly what you were doing. You were creating an environment by which students were engaging with one another. They're having to depend on one another to make whatever the project happen, or some kind of way. You had a community of banking and retail and so forth and so on. But you're teaching them math, teaching them the skills of entrepreneurship, and all of this was happening at one time. And so certain group students had to be responsible for a certain aspect of this entire community, which was again Ubuntu. And so it seems like you took that concept. Next thing I know, you enrolled in a doctoral program, and that was your dissertation topic. So I'm very impressed, excited about that. So let's go back. Action research. What does that mean to us, and how does it influence Ubuntu and the outcome as it relates to teaching? And what have you done with that particular idea around action research and teacher development?
So when we talk about action research, we're really focusing on the inquiry and exploring, as insiders or outsiders within a community. And so with the action research, I was able to identify a problem, and then to be able to clarify it through questioning. And then the next step is to collect data and analyze that data, and to be able to write about this construct that we're studying. So within that process of analyzing the data, and it is centered around teachers and teachers culturally competence, working with teachers within the urban schools, students that are being marginalized. And so studying that and working with the teachers, it has been an interesting journey in really trying to now break it down to see what are the things that I'm looking for. And so as I'm analyzing this data that I've collect extensive amount of data in observing the teachers, whether I'm doing a virtual observation or I'm doing a face-to-face observation in the classroom, is to look at what it looks like, what it sounds like, what are some of the pedagogical moves the teachers are making in the class that really affirms and validates the children in this sense of community. So as we think through the lens of Ubuntu, which is that sense that we are all interconnected. We are all interconnected. Each what one does, it impacts the other. And so helping teachers to be able to see how their interaction or how their humanity is intricately intertwined in everything that we're doing. And so within the classroom community, it is such an important part that plays a part in terms of leading students to academic achievement.
So something you said about validating, right? You said that validating the students and the pedagogy of validation. And I think that many times when we talk about education in the West, we're talking about this issue of devaluing students, that students feel devalued, excommunicated from the curricula at some level. But also you said the idea of humanity, which is tied to validation. That is, at first, teachers have to see themselves as being human, and they can see others as being human as well. And many times that doesn't happen. Our students are seen as things, as objects. And so when I observed your classroom, I noticed that there was something else about seeing them as humans. They were little humans. They were younger. They did not have the same requisite knowledge skills as you did as a mature woman, but they were seen as human with their own sets of skills and abilities. And that's something that's often missing from education systems within the West for people of African descent, especially. But then you moved on, and you're now talking about how to do this. How do you teach teachers to do this? But I want you to get to that point. But I'll talk about what has been your experience in observing and understanding Ubuntu as a construct, and how have you begun to use it even more in your classrooms, and what has been your experience as a teacher in a classroom of students, and then how's it helped you to inform the work that you do as a professor?
So, and I think to start with is how I operationalize Ubuntu pedagogy. So the way that it is being operationalized, it is like twofold. So Ubuntu pedagogy has been defined as a revolutionary approach to restoring teachers and students' humanity. So within the practice of education for freedom and genuine love. So once we understanding that the core element of Ubuntu is the ethics of care, because Ubuntu is an all-inclusive worldview. When you think about caring, making sure that levels of hospitality and respect and honesty, that you are connecting with the students that you are working with, that you are making sure that you understand that this individual that you are working with, you are able to be able to work in a space where you are connected to them, where you build authentic relationships with the students and teaching from a position of love and care. So I, as we overall looked at this idea of Ubuntu, is really fostering and improving your overall competencies as you're working with the students. And when I'm talking about the competencies, I'm talking about your attitudes, your behaviors, how you are interacting in the space, understanding your levels of privileges, because those things impact the way that we interact with the students. So in the classroom, when I'm working with the students, I used to have, teachers come into my class and to say that, oh, this is a Zen classroom. The children are so loving, they're so respectful. But as instructors, we have to be intentional about teaching students how to love each other, teaching students how to build authentic relationships. And then sometimes we say, how do you do that when you have to deliver the content? So this whole idea of the social emotional piece is integrated in everything that you do, making sure that you are validating the students. As the students come into the classroom in the mornings, do not just jump into the content and start teaching, making sure that you build relationships with the students, that you see them, you check in with them. That's on elementary level. I do it in the university level as well. As a professor, before I even go into anything that I'm teaching, I pause for the first 5 minutes to check in with the scholars. Those things are important in saying, in seeing and validating the students that you're working with. Because if you are not connected with the students, there's no instruction, there's no learning is going to take place, because that level of relationship, it really foster that growth and that feeling connected and engaged in with the content that you're facilitating. Those levels are important.
So the crux of this is about seeing people, and that's one of the ideas among the Zulu talk about sawubona, right? The idea of I see
Yeah,
you. Also,
absolutely.
the idea of bukona means presence, and people often misconstrue this idea. They stop with "I see you," and the part of it is coming from the construct of kona, of bukona, which means presence, which means I'm asking you, do you have a presence? And the notion of presence is predicated on the degree to which one is connected to the Abapanzi or the Abadlozi, the ancestors, and that you have a presence only if you are connected, and you're connected if you do proper umzabezi, or ritual. And so what you described is powerful umzabezi ritual in the context of the classroom that says that first, I acknowledge that you are here, not only because I see you, but you're here because somebody came before you. So I acknowledge the idea that your presence is predicated on your connectivity to others, and I must honor that.
Yes.
Too often within the West, we don't think about honoring the totality of a human, and so we just see a person or child as a thing to be manipulated. That's why I talk about that idea of tabula rasa, the blank slate. That it's a blank slate, and I'm supposed to just mark and write on them. But when you talk about education, you're saying that you're connecting of individuals at one time in one space. So you have multi generations coming together. That I bring my ancestry, I bring all that is and has been and will be, and to those that will be, and how I've always been here. It's all coming together, and that there is this acknowledgement. And I love how you said this. I acknowledge. I do a check in that you are human, you are spirit, you are something to be acknowledged, honored, reverenced, and that changes the tone. So then, as a result, it seems like your classroom becomes a reflection of what you give to them, and say that you're loving, you're kind, you're passionate, you're lovable, and as a result, they demonstrate that to one another. Is that how it works out? Help me out, because I mean I know what I saw,
Yes.
I know what I
Yes.
experienced. Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the key part of it, it starts with self. So the way that I further break down Ubuntu for teachers to understand it is that first you have to understand yourself. You have to understand who you are, understanding your culture, so that you can interact with others within their cultures, and knowing how to make sure that you respect yourself so that you can pass that on. The other piece is to making sure so you have that level of self-awareness, and then building relationships with the students, building those authentic relationships with the students, helping them to be able to work collaboratively in the spaces, actively engaging them in what you are doing, to say that, okay, yes, I see you, where we are working in this community, in this classroom community, this environment. We are working together for a better good. So be intentional about our practices, making sure that we are unifying the students to work together, and that takes a level of work in how we interact with each other, in how we treat each other, as we are doing that, um, even on the university level, is to making sure that we are creating a space for individuals of how we treat each other, and setting those tones in your classroom. Whether you are engaging in dialogues, setting the tone of how we navigate in these spaces. Those things are very important, that we create a hospitable and accountable community in how we interact within our spaces, because hospitality is the essence of restoring our communities. And so we understanding ourselves, build relationships, we unify the students that we're working with, and we teach from a position of love and care, and that's genuine love. We cannot fake love with children. We cannot fake love when you're teaching. It's these little humans, they quickly see through us if you're faking it. So you have to be genuine to be able to connect with that spirit. And teaching is a spiritual dance. That's another level, that you understand this work that you are engaging with. It's not just this physical being that you are connecting with. And that's why, and research have shown it, that when students feel connected to the teacher or the facilitator of learning, we see that levels where they improve in their academics. And making sure that we nurture the minds of the children, or the individuals that we are working with, and being intentional of how we are going about nurturing the minds, developing caring relationship, and just humanizing, making sure that you are humanizing from the curriculum materials that you're using, the relationships, the learning community that you're engaging in, and develop in that levels of mutual trust. And even as simple as listening and supporting. At times, as educators, and we are engaged in these spaces, we have to take that step back and listen to the students. I like to call them scholars. So you hear, whether they're in elementary all the way to to college level, I refer to them as scholars. And within the teaching profession, we have to make sure that understand the why for ourselves, why we're doing this. So we are studying what we are doing. And so we teach from a position of love and care, and we're utilizing evidence-based practices to make sure that we're meeting the diverse needs of the students that we're working with. So it comes full circle, and understanding who we are, understanding the different privileges that we come to the table with is key. It's key. When I did the initial study, I was working with teachers from different racial backgrounds. When I went into Africa and I was looking through the window, I had some interesting findings in just my observation working with the teachers. That levels of privilege impact the way that we interact with our students. Here in the US, we'll talk a lot about it and focus just on white privilege, but it's more than white privilege. We come to the table with lots of privileges, whether it's your economical standings, whether it's your whatever class you're in, middle class, working class. All of those impact the way that we create and develop meaningful relationships with our students.
You are really a profound scholar, right? And the way that you approach education is very distinct from what I know you went to go to school to learn, which is why you have this passion. People don't quite recognize this, and then so we get so caught in this dance of talking about evidence based, try to make it sound like it has validity. However, it's valid on its own merit. And I keep saying the same thing, right? We don't have to use European mechanisms, devices to validate our African reality. All right. So we know that the mechanistic way that they break down the psychological aspect of our children in schools around the world. The idea of learning about white supremacist notions and constructs, right? It's a psychological breakdown. Nobody goes through and talks about how you quantify, how do you operationalize that. It's just done because people know that it works.
Mm-hmm.
My point here is that this is done because you know that it works. And so we don't have to keep trying to dance, right, and try to make sure that they appreciate it. We don't have to do that because we know who we are as an African people. I want to make sure that we acknowledge those that are joining in with us from Zimbabwe. I know that you spent time in the region, so we have a family joining us from Zimbabwe, from Ethiopia. We say from South Africa. They're joining in from the UK, Sierra Leone, Papua New Guinea. So you have family joining in. I want you to know right now, all over the world, just understanding and hearing your profound voice about how do you approach the educational environment and this idea of reforming. To me, now you talk about reforming teachers to conceptualize themselves as different. You said start with yourself. You said having a loving, caring environment. You got to love and care for yourself. And secondly, to have an approach that makes the scholar, the student, the younger people human. And that's not something that we gain. I want to slide into this next element of understanding why are you so passionate about this? What have you experienced as a teacher, as an instructor, as a facilitator, as a Hersita, as a scepter, as a purveyor of knowledge, of truth, of wisdom? What have you encountered that made you say that we have to do this thing called education differently?
So that it applies on many levels for me as a passionate educator, and I think I can sum it up when in my lived experience, experiencing injustice within the education system, understanding that injustice injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so I've been in spaces in education where I've seen people use education as an instrument of dehumanizing. And that is a dangerous weapon. That is a dangerous weapon. And understanding my position as an African, my position as an African woman, and growing up in the West, I was born in Jamaica, raised in the US. So I understand my position as an African woman, and not seeing our experiences within the realm of education, and seeing how levels of our children have fall on the end where education has been used as a weapon to dehumanize. And so for me as a commit, what bring me to this work and a commitment to this work is to be able to go in spaces where I am transforming and helping ones to transform and shift their mindset. And if I can do this within my lifetime, i have I have done my work, because I've seen where, you know, education has been used and as an instrument of an instrument to dehumanize children across the world. And in even the in Africa, my experience in Africa, the colonial style of education, we need to get to a place where we decolonize our minds and our education to be able to get to the place where we want to go. And so when I look at that and studying deeply, I know that my ancestors were organized people. We were intentional with our practices. And for something to be successful, for me to pass this on to another generation, we have to operate from a framework. Whether you are in the Pan-Africanist movement, we have to operate from a framework. And so Ubuntu pedagogical components is a framework that we can use to operate from. And to me, to be able to bring forth changes in the 21st century and beyond, Ubuntu pedagogic is non-negotiable. I see it as a transformative and perfect antidote to be able to help to decolonize the education or the colonizing pedagogical practices that are in education and across schools around the world. So Ubuntu, for me, Ubuntu pedagogy is a way to restore our humanity and our practice in education for freedom.
This idea of liberation through education is
Oh,
essential.
yes.
You said that you spent time even in on the continent, and you noticed that this colonial educational system that is predicated on European superiority is prevalent. And so it's not just something that's happened in the US. It's not something that's happened in Jamaica. It's happening all over, where the colonial system of education informs into their inhumanity, right? So the idea that they're inferior to Europeans, in reality, is something else in totality. So um, I love how you just did this, do this work, and you took it to the continent. You actually learned about Ubuntu some other place, went back to the continent, and you saw something that was very similar to what you experienced in the U.S., which is the colonization of the intellect of a population. Share some more about that experience that you had on the continent, so that people know that you are indeed a world scholar, as I know you are.
So my experience is spending extensive time in Botswana, in the rural areas, going to the schools, collaborating with the teachers, engaging in conversations with the students as well. it really shifted my mindset. So what I observed in the schools, this level of Ubuntu was more evident with the students, their interaction, their relationships with each other. One particular experience that I had was watching a group of students in the schoolyard. So it was, I guess, lunchtime. They were all out in the schoolyard, and the children. There was a group of boys and young ladies. They were trying to get something for lunch, and I observed them pooling their money together to be able to make sure that everyone in the group had something to eat. And so that was a powerful evidence to see Ubuntu in action within the classrooms. And I say this with a disclaimer, because I've been in many classrooms. I've seen where evidence of Ubuntu was being practiced among some of the teachers, and where there is that level of authentic love and building relationships and connecting with the students and seeing them and validating them. But I also had the other experience where I see levels of where students were being dehumanized. And I speak especially to the indigenous population of the Khoisans, the children particular of the Khoisans, and how they were being treated. And so within those observations, it really helped me to see that, we have to be intentional in shifting our mindset. And there was another interesting point that I observed with the Khoisan, in this was in Namibia. No, this was in Botswana. The families do not want to send their children to school. And so going out into the field, and the translator is talking to the families. One of the things that really stood out to me, and I took this with me, is when one of the parents said that the reason they do not send their children to school is because they beat our children in your schools. We do not beat our children. When they stop beating our children, then we will send them to their schools. So within that indigenous population, they had forms of discipline that, yes, that is important, but they're not doing corporal punishment. And so I know that that was a big, a shift that is going on in Africa, in many of the countries, like shifting from that corporal punishment. And that is a piece that we have to be, we have to pay attention to, of how we are looking at our practices of discipline. Where are some of those practices are coming from? Because as African people, we had practices of discipline that was not dehumanizing. But I am a stern disciplinarian, and corporal punishment is not an option for me. But I get students to work for me. I get students to collaborate in spaces. So it's all about how we go about humanizing our spaces and find best practices to utilize to help us to do the work that we are engaged in.
So understanding our indigenous practices that affirm our humanity. This seems
Yes.
to be actually what you're doing here, right? You are looking at practice that affirms our humanity, and you also talk about how the colonized populace, right, around the world identify with the oppressor to think about education, when in reality we are diminishing the humanity of our children, of our scholars. Dr. Woodson says that when you control a man's thinking, right, you don't worry about his actions. And he talks about how one is educated to see themselves as being worthy of going to the back door. The European system of education is designed just that, to diminish the worth and value, the perception of children, and thus they see education as something as more of the enemy, as opposed to being as an advocate or something that can help them to get to another level of existence. And so you're saying that for you, education is not simply about information transformation, it is content, but it's also about environment that is about, again, humanity and holistic elevation of consciousness, which then leads to people having a greater sense of purpose, identity, and direction. And so they know who they are, they know why they are here, and what they're to do with their beingness while they're here, which is often missing. I want you to know that as you've been speaking, I've been capturing as best as possible the jewels and nuggets of your articulations. And so I have sought to capture the ones about understanding our indigenous practices that affirm our humanity is very important. That you said that we must be intentional in shifting our mindsets. Sometimes we just happen to do so. You said that we must operate from an African framework in order to decolonize the African mind. Just want you to know that I've been capturing your nugget. So you have to be able to see your powerful quotes here. Now, you have moved from doing this work in a classroom to being called upon to teach other teachers this process. So you've also researched how to impart this to other teachers. What has been your experience in teaching teachers about Ubuntu in the context of education? How have they received it? All ethnic groups. I know that we talk often about how some people, whites may not, Europeans may not be receptive to it, and others. But I think that we all have to hobble through this process of humanizing students. So, as a trainer of teachers, talk about your research around that and your experience.
So this piece, the research around working with teachers is one that I do it in terms of teaching them, breaking it down in the three pillars that I focus on: helping teachers to see humanism within the curriculum, their relationships and their learning community, and collaboration and their partnerships, collaborations and partnerships, whether it is with the families, with the children that they're working with, um, taking them through the relationships and the learning community, helping them to now understand how to humanize the spaces that they're working with and build authentic relationships. And then for the level of humanism within in the curricula is to make sure that we are mindful of the materials that we are using when we are working with children of different cultural and linguistic and backgrounds. And so the work that I've been doing with the student, with the teachers, is grounded in the framework of transformative learning. So that's what is grounded within my conceptual framework, is transformative learning. And through the level of transformative learning, my goal is to be able to take the teachers to a level of Ubuntu competence. And so how do I go about doing that is through the book studies. So I do the book studies with the teachers and walk them through the framework, having the teachers engaging in dialogues. Dialogues are powerful to shift mindsets, critical self-reflections. Those things are helpful in shifting mindsets. However, I also, within transformative learning, as people are growing and changing, we engage in what are sometimes crucial and difficult conversations that we are unpacking this work. So sometimes it leads to disoriented dilemmas. Sometimes folks are upset because of they're used to things being done in one way. But what I find that teachers who have gone through the program is that when they successfully shift their mindsets and keep growing. So within that framework, it's a constant work in setting the structure to help them to get to that place of shifting the mindset, and then getting them to a place where they have improved in their cultural competence, that they're now becoming that self-directed learner, that they're more aware. And within that awareness, that's when we start seeing in changes, because we have to understand and to help the teachers to understand that their humanity is intricately intertwined with the humanities of the students that they're working with. And within that process, it is a constant work to from an administrative level. So when you're shifting culturally, you have to shift from the administrative level down to, the teachers and down to the students, to create cultures where the students are feeling connected and having a culture within, if it's a school or an organization, a culture of, I call it a Ubuntu culture within your school. So that is the core of how you operate. So it is an ongoing work, and within the framework, we have been implementing it and collaborating with other institutes that are unpacking it and incorporating it in their practices as well, so that we can see those levels of change.
Something you said about the dilemma, all right, and I had the word, and I was holding the word. I didn't want to jump in and cut you off. It's very similar to cognitive dissonance, right? So the idea of when teachers are being taught something and it doesn't quite jive with what they're dealing with. What was it word you used again to describe that?
I said disoriented dilemma.
Yes. Now let's talk about the disoriented dilemma, right? This idea. Now, what is that, and how does it manifest as you do these trainings? What do they say to you? What's going on?
So when we talk about disoriented dilemma, is that we are at times when information is new, and it caused us to have this shift in our values, in our beliefs, or even in our assumptions. So being as a facilitator, we have to be prepared to help these help the teachers, and as they go through the shift, because the conversations that you'll see the shifts taking place, where they sometimes they might be upset, sometimes they might cry, sometimes it gets to a place where um, they're now shifting their mindset, and they start reflecting on their practice, even reflecting on things that, their experiences, as maybe when they were students, or now things that they have done in the past as teachers. And so within that level of transformation, it really impacts the teachers, because now they're shifting their beliefs. And we have to be at a place, as a facilitator, you have to be at a place where sometimes you just listen deeply, and suspend your judgments as they go through these, I call them aha moments, because it really you see that change started to happen within their mindsets and how they now view the world. But for them to get there, they had to unpack. They had to now get to a place where they are self-aware, and they are getting ready to have to come up with an action plan. Yeah. And that's one of the pieces of transformative learning. Once they start coming up with an action plan, you're understanding now that the transformation is taking place. And when you go back and observe them in your practices, you can start to pinpoint these practices. And so I've developed like a rubric to utilize for the evidence. What are some of the evidence that I'm looking for? So when it comes to humanism in the curriculum, what are some of the evidences that I'm looking for?
So you talked about this dilemma, and I want to end with this rubric conversation about how do you know it's actually manifesting within the classroom? How can one know that they're doing this, living this, and breathing this? And what is the benefit of this? I know that you talked to. I can clearly hear how European teachers would begin to cry and have these moments because they have been forced to shift and think differently about education. What has been your experience with European minded or quasi European minded Black people, African people, right? With these concepts, because we have to also break through because we had years of colonized constructs in our heads and how we do this how we operate. So, what has been your experience with us, the
Mm.
colonized Negro?
So that experience is quite interested, and the experience also I'm going by data. So when I look at the experience from whether they were middle class or working class, you see where those the shifts were different from the working class teachers if they're coming from that background in comparison to the middle class amongst the African Americans or the blacks, the shift from the middle class teachers that are in the middle class level, it was more challenging because there are a lots of things that they had to unpack. And in terms of their instructional practices and the things that they're doing, they operate a lot from a deficit mindset, even when dealing with, Black children, because they don't have those experiences. So that was based on my research, the seeing how their relationships and how they are, acquiring this knowledge and planning a course of action through their self examination. It was significantly less amongst the middle class teachers in comparison to the working class teachers. And that deficit mindset is a work in progress, coming from a standpoint of blaming the children instead of, looking at all the factors that are impacting the learners and come up with an action plan to be able to support the learners.
So even when you talk about the middle class, right? These are European constructs upon people, and again, you emphasize from the research, and I think that we can understand research as it relates to anecdotal data as well as quantified other forms of data that these things are real in the sense that if you identify with the oppressor's constructs, then you identify with the oppressor's conceptualizations, right? That's not difficult to comprehend. So even the idea of middle class values between what and what is always a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was just reading an article just yesterday in the U.S. about says that mentioning this discussion about the Great Resignation, and they were saying that lower income individuals, and they say lower income based on 60,000 or less per year. And it's like, you start thinking about the average salary of a teacher in the US, and it's in that range. So even though people say that I'm middle class, that data says that no, you're not. You're lower class because if you look at the earnings, this is where you are, that you fall. So it's always a struggle, and I think that's the struggle is to be validated by the oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Yes.
use their constructs to be validated by them. Again, when you affirm this is who you are, you don't have to be validated by anybody. This is who I am. And I think that this is the other portion is that you are affirming a reality that we have been taught in our systems to see as having no value and worth, and that will
Mm-hmm.
cause this dilemma that you describe. It will cause this cognitive dissonance that
Mm-hmm.
others describe in psychology. Is that how do you affirm that which we have been conditioned to see as inferior, as less than, as having no place? And the reason why we're educating them is to bring them into a space of humanity that they don't have. And you're saying that they have the humanity, and all of a sudden it's like, well, what am I doing this work for, right? Because I'm conditioned to see them to see the people as being less than, having no humanity, and now you were telling me that they have a way of being that's human, that's far more advanced than mine, and I have to start crying, right? Because I can't handle this, or I get irate, frustrated, angry. And I've done sessions where I mentioned multiculturalism, and Europeans just break out the room and they get all angry, and black folks say everything you do is about black folks. It's not all black. It's not, African. I'm not African. I'm all kinds of stuff. So all this distance
Yes.
it's happening because we've been conditioned to see the African as less than. And in
Yes.
reality, when we begin to explore the systems of African people, the philosophy of African people, the ways of being, we see that it's not an inferior population at all. When you mention, I discipline my children without having to beat them. We have loving relationships in the community where we can enjoy and embrace one another's humanity. That we go to a space trying to get something to eat, and we all pool resources together to eat. You know that when we were in the Gambia together, people would put things together, and the plate was prepared together, and everybody could eat. And so we have these systems of being that are very powerful, very profound, very human, very spiritual. We talk about spirit and teaching and touching the hearts of others. That's a whole nother paradigm that Europeans don't teach, because again, it's about the teacher being the person in front of them that knows everything and the student knows nothing. But this model says that everybody knows something that's come together to learn to know even more, right? And so this is a very powerful model. And I think then that when you talk about research, Dr. Blackwood, I would encourage you to continue to expand the notion of research to ground it in, as you already do, in an African reality of understanding, as opposed to trying to validate it for Europeans, because they're not going to understand this because it's not a part of their system, right? It's not what they have been trained to do. They have been trained to see us as less than. So it's not going to work. So no matter how much we tweak it, I've been doing it for years, it's not going to work. So I love the way that we identify with the African reality and we move forward with that. I want you to be able to close out with the points of, how do you know that you are teaching in the spirit of Ubuntu, and what does your research tell you is the benefit of doing so, or what are the outcomes of such?
So when you are teaching in the spirit of Ubuntu, you have a sense of connection. You have a sense of strong cultural identity. And this is where you help the students to understand who they are and their purpose in this world. And the second part to that, you just repeat the second part.
Well, you said something earlier. You said about the rubric. Share with us the rubric of, you mentioned, you were talking about humanism. You were mentioning that. And so what are those things that people can do? Like, it's like 4 or 5 things that people do, and reading your material, that this is how you know that you're operating in the spirit of Ubuntu. You're doing this, A, B, and C. So explain that rubric to us.
So just in short, because the rubric is extensive in the evidence, but in short, what you want to be able to look for is, do you understand who you are as an educator? Do you build authentic relationships with students? Do you spend time to unify the students and teaching them what does unity looks like when we are working together in a community? And do you teach from a position of love and care?
Hit it again. Know who you are. What else?
Build authentic relationships.
Build relationships. Go.
Unify the students to work in a collaborative space and teach from a position of love and care.
Right. So this is heavy, right? Knowing who you are, building relationships, right? Operating from a space of authenticity, and making sure that there is love and care. You first of all have to have love for yourself to do that.
Yes.
And so the basis of all love is self-love, and not the issue of being selfish, but self-centered, but to understand that there's a lot to me to love. And when I know how to do that, then I can teach you how to love me, and I can teach you how to love yourself as well. Let's go to this. What has been the outcome, right, of this particular model? What have been the advantages of doing this work in the school systems?
The outcomes is where you basically find that the students they're feeling a sense of love, the way that they collaborate with each other, a reduction of bullyism within the schools, and an increase in academic achievement. And so within my studies, and there was a subset of children that I have followed when I first started the self study in 2014. So within that level, I find that where students, their academic achievement went significantly, they improved significantly. At one point, we had 100% of the students, passing the state exam. Where the students are feeling connected to their teachers, their community, and they want to be able to do more to improve who they are. And so you hear those evidence in the children in their language because they're feeling a sense of love. So that was something that I have seen, evidence of that. They're, growing emotionally, socially, and academically as well.
With these benefits, right, why would there not be more support for Ubuntu in the classroom, right? With these outcomes of improved academic performance, right, at the state level, all these things that are quantifiable in the context of European education, why would there be a pushback on something like this?
And to be honest, I've heard others said to me, "Why Ubuntu? Why you couldn't just call it the caring theory?" But I had to say it's more than that. So because the word Ubuntu, sometimes they don't take the time to pay attention to what it's saying because of the word, and that was something that I stood my ground with, and I give thanks with my supporters and my committee who stood behind me to be able to help me to break this construct down. Because initially I got pushed back on Ubuntu. What? You want to do a doctorate in Ubuntu? What? So it was the reality of it, because it's an African construct. It is something that is coming from the Bantu languages in bringing it forward. For me, I went on a Sankofa journey. I returned to the past to learn and bring that forth. And so I will continue to do the work to those who want to listen and those who want to be able to implement it.
So in this segment, how can people get in touch with you about this work? How can people check in with you about receiving the training and being an Ubuntu educator? How do people continue to grow in understanding the impact of Ubuntu in education?
And as I said, the best way to reach out to me is from my website, drablackwood.com. That is my website to reach out to me. We do have a book coming out. It will be ready soon. And so that is the best way to reach out to me, drablackwood.com. That is my website, to be able to connect with me.
So this book that's coming out that I'm excited to be a part of. What is the what tell us about this book, and what do you think is going to happen as a result of this book being released?
So I'm a researcher, but I'm also a practitioner. I approach this book becoming a responsive Ubuntu educator, Ubuntu pedagogy. This book is really one that provides practical application of Ubuntu. When we say, what are the things that you can do to help you to understand who you are, the things that you can do to build authentic relationships within the realm of education. How do you go about unifying the students that you're working with and teaching from a position of love and care? So the book is a practical provide guidance in terms of what it looks like and what it sounds like. Because sometimes we hear it in theory, but then you leave the space like, how am I going to do that? How do I understand who I am? How do I understand, to build authentic relationships? Because those things sound like just words to people at times, but what are the practical applications?
So Ubuntu, the book, the pedagogy, the practice, the implications, we've heard all of that with Dr. Blackwood. She shared with us clearly what it is that needs to happen within the educational system, how it can be transformative in the lives and minds of others. We also understand that there's a pushback in such content because of the framework of being Europeanized that sees the African as being inferior. We recognize that she is indeed a leader, a Pan-African leader, advocating for the humanity, the rights, the expression of African people. She's unapologetically doing this particular work, engaging in the endeavors to make sure that generations understand who they are and how much power they have to be able to impact the entire universe. We're grateful to be able to have a mind like Dr. Blackwood, to be able to stand in the wedge, in the gap, to not only teach students, scholars, but also to inform teachers who will inform other students and our scholars. This is a very important and critical work. We must be able to support this work because it is the way that we continue to build and expand the African world. As long as we operate from a position of inferiority, then we suffer under the guise of European domination. We understand that the greatest weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. That's given to us by Stephen Biko. So when we free our minds, we understand also how to decolonize our minds and then to live as free and liberated African people. Dr. Blackwood talked about this quite often, about education for the purpose of liberation. We encourage you to continue on this journey with us as we begin to unpack further the dynamics of African humanity in this Pan-African Leadership series. We want to be thankful for the various sponsors for this event. Speak Black to Me, the Pan-African Leadership Network, the United States of Africa. We want to also give thanks and praise to Daniel Mabuno for the work that he does to make sure that we are affirmed in our African being. That it is indeed grateful for you to be able to tune in, to listen, and to be willing to share and to learn and to grow. Together, we will build. We build with Ubuntu. Ubuntu says that together we humans, and in our humanity, we express ourselves and we are powerful. So we want to be thankful again for Dr. Blackwood. You back up for your work. And anything you want to say in closing, it's on you.
I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing, and give thanks for the organization that has been doing this amazing work out there so that we can continue for the liberation of our people. Abibi Faodie.
And there we are. Tune in next time. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.